Details matter. They all add up into something that can be really great or actually make a difference. One of the things I want to talk about is the bass drum for a second. Very important thing. I stand on the side and I watch the drummer play and I get an idea. Is he catching, going to the tom-toms and snare for a minute, is he catching the rim of the drum? Is the angle of the drum such where maybe he's catching too much rim and not enough of the rim? Maybe he doesn't even know that he is. Maybe he wants it, but it's something to be aware of. That can make a big difference. On the kick drum in particular, it's important that the beater be as much in the center of the drum as possible. If the beater is off axis of the center of the drum, too high, too low, too far to the left, too far to the right, the drum will not have the most amount of tone, right? So if I took a drum right now and I hit the edge, right, of that drum, you'd hear one tone. And as I move to the center, this is where you would get the most amount of beauty and the most amount of tone out of the instrument. So always make sure the beater is very, very center, right? I, again, do not like anything between the beater and the drum. I like the beater hitting straight on to the drum. I understand that you can put holes through bass drums. I understand they go out of tune. But in a controlled environment where we're doing recording, we want the most out of the instrument. This is not a live gig where obviously that can't break in the middle of the gig. Here we can stop and fix it. Another thing, believe it or not, will make a big difference in the bass drum sound if you're having trouble sometimes, is the size of the cymbal or where the cymbal is located on top of the drum. This is also true for tom-toms. And if you stop and think about it, it would make sense from the perspective that, if you're covering something, like if I'm covering my voice like this, it's going to sound a lot different than if I'm not covering my voice. And that's effectively what you're doing with the cymbals. If the cymbals are way over the top of the tom-toms or way over the bass drum, like a big ride, that can be a problem, and you can try to reposition that. That's something to pay attention to. If a bass drum is not as dead as you'd like it, or let's say the reflection of the cymbals too much, take a packing blanket and just drape it over the bass drum. That will do amazing things to deaden the bass drum and give it a solid sound. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's a little bit of a trick of the trade. Snare drum, very important thing. When you're putting the microphone on the snare drum, it's very important that the snares are aligned with the snare drum mic, right? So in the case of me, where I'm using a U64 for the color, I want to make sure that wherever that U64 is, which is like this, that the snares are aligned. The snares are not sitting like this or like this, but they're aligned right to the microphone. Absolutely parallel to the microphone. Another thing to consider about the snare drum is when it's sitting in the cradle, that it's not too tight. Some players will really, really tighten down that snare really aggressively, and you're just choking it. You got to make sure that the snare is sitting in the cradle loosely, so the drum itself is not being choked, so it has sustain. The more you choke that, you kill the sustain. So if you want a nice sustain to the drum, you want the drum to breathe, you want it to be bright, make sure the cradle is not too tight on the snare drum itself. The gig bag should never be on the floor tom. This is a no-no. It'll kill the sustain of the drum for sure. The other thing is, never, ever parallel to the floor. Make sure your floor tom is on an angle. If it's parallel to the floor, it's just gonna cancel out phase-wise, right? Because the drum's gonna hit, it's gonna hit the bottom, it's gonna come back and cancel. You need an angle. Always an angle on the floor tom. Always. I like to use matchbooks that I put underneath the legs of the tom-tom. This allows, when you hit the tom-tom, right, to not couple to the floor, but actually it allows the tom-tom to do this. So when you hit the drum, it moves up and down like this and basically allows the drum to breathe. If it's coupled to the floor hard, it's kind of like the cradle and the snare. Now you're killing the drum. The drum wants to be able to sustain, so it needs to be loose off the floor. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll take hard kobos that have a hard surface, like these over here, and I'll put them around the drum, all the way around them, so I get a very focused mid-range. If I really want that real clear focused, real clear attack, real clear focus, that's how I get it. Or I'll experiment, as I said, with huge discs or something behind them that's hard surface. In fact, I've even put microphones on them before and had some really great, interesting sounds. Experiment. Just because we put the drums in this part of the room doesn't mean they're the best part of the room. I've had them in all different parts of this room. This drum bella, sometimes I bring it down so it's really, really tight, Sometimes I leave it open because I want the sound of the room. These are all obvious things to try. But the other little things I just mentioned, which are very small, little tiny details, but they can make the difference.